Alrighty, so for my presentation, I'm going to be talking about local storage. One moment here, let me pull up the slideshow. Okay, and I have it ready here. Okay, in the meeting, share screen. Okay. Okay, so I'll be talking about local storage today. Local storage is it's a way to save information on the client's browser. This information persists even after the browser has been closed or you've navigated from the page or the page gets refreshed. That information that was saved or pushed into local storage remains and is available for use for that web page. It is a list of stored name and value pairs. It's kind of like a map where you pass it a string and it returns a value, which is a string value. It can only store and send string values. So that's something you need to be aware of. You can't put objects in there without using like a JSON format. It is not a database or universal. So if you use local storage and you need to access that information from a different user, that's not possible. You have to pull it from local storage and throw it to the other user using a different interface. So it's a local it's a local memory usage. And it's not, that information isn't accessible through the server unless it's sent to the server. So it is, it's not secure. So, how do you go back? I ruined it. All right. Anyways, it's not secure because if you're storing, what I mean by not secure is if you're trying to store like sensitive information that you should be storing on the server, on the local browser, that information is accessible and the users can go in there and tamper with it and do things outside of your web application. So if it's something that needs to be regulated by the server, make sure it's handled by the server, not by this local storage. And the syntax for this is, can you see both examples? Okay, so the syntax here is just local storage. Make sure you're camel casing local storage dot set item, and then you give it this is the name that you're going to store it under, and then this, or the identifier, and then this section here, the second parameter, is the value that you're storing in local storage. And so to get this value, Smith, out of local storage, you would say local storage dot get item, and then pass it the identifier last name, and it would return Smith as a string. You can also use local storage dot last name. So it is a JavaScript object, and you can just add in parameters like you would with a normal JavaScript object. You can just make a new assignment. Last name is equal to whatever string you want, and then to access. Oh yeah.
Quick question. So you don't have to say set item.
You
can just make up dot last name and it creates it. Okay, cool.
Correct. And so, yeah, this is an either or situation. And then to access that information, instead of saying get item, you could just say local storage dot last name and use that. And that would return the value of the string. This is the browser support table that I took off of W3 Schools, just to give you an idea of what versions are supported. And then we can go into...
Can I just pause for a second on
Sure.
that? And I won't make you go back. But it's such an interesting thing that you can create the object and get it the same way. Right. You know, like that's so kind of confusing.
I thought it was fairly similar to using other JavaScript objects.
Well, it is. So it's more of a universal statement.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. There's like a really structured way to do it with the value lookup and with the identifier and the value as parameters, and then there's like the shorthand way of doing it, just using like the JavaScript object syntax to replace the...
Which I like, it's efficient, but if you're just looking at it like, well, has it been created or am I calling it? Not sure.
Right. Yeah, yeah, and there's no real like initiation of local storage values. It's more just like, because I mean, even if you were to assign, if we went back to that last thing, if you were to use that assignment local storage dot set item and then pass it last name as your identifier for something else at some other point in the code, you just overwrite what was there. Mm-hmm. And so even then, there's no way to see that I'm declaring it here and I'm putting a value in it here. But yeah. So the web example I made, can you see my browser? No? Let me see if I can.
Maybe it's just all white. Is that what it looks like to you? Okay.
Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a little application I made, and you can change this. This is I have this hosted on my personal site, so you can change this to be whatever you want, and these values are being loaded. How do you spell jealousy?
JEALOUS. Why?
Okay. And then, so you can change these and then just hit save toy. And this down here is just a little update thing to show you that it was saved. And then if you refresh the page, or even if you were to close this and then go back into it, it's still saved. So that's not normal. If you without using local storage, it would erase it every time you refreshed it or navigated away from the screen and came back. It would be all blank unless you had values preloaded into it in JavaScript. And I'll show you how I did that here. In the code example, I have I don't like how it looks on GitHub. I'm going to use Atom. Can you see Atom? Can you see it? No? How do you... New share, maybe?
Are you looking at another screen or on? There you go.
Now you can see it?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the code for the application I just showed you. So here are all the inputs here. And their values are stored in local storage here. So I take this toy object. I use the input values that the user gives to create the new object, and then I take that toy object, pass it into a JSON stringify, as the value in a set item local storage call. And then from there, when the page is reloaded, it accesses local storage here. So when the page is loaded, let's see, yeah, so body onload calls the preload function, and this is the preload, and it sets all the inputs up here to the value of whatever was in local storage. And so you get that by you take local storage get item and then pass it the identifier of toy, which is what we saved it as down here. And then it returns a string, which is the JSON stringify that we passed it of that toy object earlier. And when you parse it, it turns it back into a toy object, which you assign to the variable toy, and you can access those values here as you assign them into the different inputs. So, any questions?
So I have a question, not necessarily about the local storage, but your function on line 57 to save the toy. So it creates a new toy object right there, right?
Right.
So I guess in that object where you have the different values, what are they associated to? Is it like input name and then it gives it a value, or?
So this is getting the value of the element that has the input name ID, which is this input. Input name ID is connected to the name of the toy input, which if you go back into the browser.
So I get where it's getting that value, but what is it associated with inside the object? Is it like a name or is it a position?
Sorry.
Like
yeah, let me go back to where I was. So where it's creating the toy, here it is. Where'd it go? You said 57. Okay, here we go. So this is a new toy. So this should all be one line, and this is the name value, this is the type of toy it is, and that coincides with this function, the toy function, which is a constructor of a JavaScript object.
Gotcha.
So these are parameters in a constructor call for a toy object. And so this is the name, that's the type of the toy, this is its special ability, this is its weakness, this is the name of the owner. And so those coincide with these here.
Yeah, I didn't even see that whole
structure.
That makes sense.
Can I see your HTML for your form?
Yeah, 1 second. Browser and local. Oh, for the form, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I thought it was on the same page.
It is. I got confused there for a second. Okay, here we go. The input is right here. So these are all the different inputs. Mm-hmm. The name of the toy, the type of the toy, special abilities, limitations of weakness, name of the owner. Mm. And so they just have the IDs here. Mm. And then, yeah, they're blank here, but they get loaded here.
So just sharing something that I learned, like if we were to pass this form also with PHP, then like those IDs wouldn't work. As far as I understand, it needs to be the name, or those IDs could, but it needs to be the name, like the name, because it's got to be the
name value. Yeah, so instead it would have a name, and then you would name it the
right. Okay. Well, I just learned that, so I was curious if you were able to do that with the JavaScript, but you'd have to add that in, right?
Right. Yeah. So you just it might be. Can you look up in JavaScript by name? Do you know?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Like document get element.
Oh.
By name.
Well, I don't know. But you didn't give it a name, so.
No, but if it did have a name, like if you were to use both
Uh-huh.
I mean, I guess you wouldn't need to use both if you're using PHP, but
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So yeah, if you're using PHP, this would need to be name.
Mm-hmm.
Did you try and clear any of your local storage?
No, I didn't clear it, but to clear it is just local storage dot clear. It's
Yeah.
a built-in function. So
Yeah, I'm still having an error in mind. So I use the clear function, and then I use the more specific ones where you can like eliminate it by like the specific keyword. But I still have an error in mind where the last one doesn't clear it for some reason. But the instructor gave my program like he didn't give me any feedback on any of it. He just like
yeah,
passed it off. So I still
yeah. On one of mine I submitted, his feedback was good enough. He gave me 10 out of 10. I'm like, oh, what the? Okay, thanks. All right then. Guess I'll move on.
make sure that when you upload this to him in your request for it to sign off, just omit this part of the recording. Say that you're present like 20 seconds ago.
Yeah. So yeah, I hadn't used Clear. I probably should have, but and this doesn't make mention of it, but if you go back to the
Well, I guess what would be the difference between remove object?
remove is removing a single value. So you would say remove and then give it the identifier, and it would take that item out of local storage.
Okay.
But clear
Just erases the data.
Right, erases everything that's stored in local storage for that page.
Okay.
Okay. If that's it, I think that's the end of my presentation.
Very good. Very nice. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. I might just leave it in this mode if that's okay. I just think it's easier to work with. So this is the document object model, and I've actually had a major aha moment in this past week, understanding that this actually creates an object, and maybe everyone else has known that, but that's why you can use dot notation, like when we say document dot get element by ID and those kind of things. That's what's happening here, is that all of this is created in the browser as an object, and that's why we can pull from it. That was just a revelation to me. So.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I hadn't thought about it like that, but it makes sense. And I guess you can access it by an array as well, right? You can give it like the number. Sorry.
Yes, you can. And in fact, we will see that, I think, at one point. Yes. So anyway, I just think that that's super important to understand. That's why we can change styles and everything. So everything here is created like a massive object. And let's see. And the reason is because browsers they create this to be able to parse it and send it to the page. And so JavaScript uses that giant object. So
does it use a string? It uses it as a string, stringifies it in JSON?
It doesn't say. So
because I think information has to be transferred as text. So
yeah. I'm sure it's something along those lines. And I think each browser probably handles it a little differently, and that's why we have to worry about browser compatibility. So you can also change the CSS with it as well, because it's not just the HTML structure, but the CSS also gets parsed and loaded, and that's why you can do things like .style, display, or .style, background color, that kind of thing. So, which I think is exciting.
And I just want to add in that I realized, I don't know if anybody else uses brackets, but I like to use brackets. And they actually came up with this new portion of it that you can access your CSS file by hitting Control-E, and it'll put the code out there, and you can leave it into your HTML document just in this form, the CSS form, or you can hide it and have it in your styles folder, whichever or, either or that you want. So I thought that was pretty interesting because it made it, I don't know, kind of concreted it with me on the way that you can manipulate it through this manner.
Yeah, cool. So nice when things are logical, like when things are starting to like make sense. All right, so we also have, you can also manipulate events with JavaScript, and events are part of the DOM in a way. So, well, yeah, things happen with those, so it can react to all existing events on the page. So for our fluency, we are supposed to look at create element, append child, and insert before. So that's what I focused on here. Hopefully that will help. Maybe everyone's already submitted this, but so if you create an element, this is the syntax for it is simply like create, a variable, and then it's document.create element, and then the tag name. And the tag name is actually the type of element to be created, like a div or a paragraph or an H2 or whatever, and you actually put it in quotes. So that's how you create an element. And we'll go through, I'll come back to creating an element, but we're going to look at a few things here. So I've got just a GIF here of appending a child. So you can see that, you can see this happen here. So I'm just adding these words onto this phrase here, and I'm going to actually show you the code for this because it's kind of interesting. So are you seeing my code? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at, this is the code for, I'm just going to make this a little bigger. This is actually the code right here, the one that says yes and no. And then I'm going to go over to my HTML, and you actually pass through those words in the argument. So that's what like this text is right here, is that it actually gets passed in the HTML, so I can change this to be whatever I want it to be. And then it gets appended to this paragraph. So, and I'm going to come back, we'll come back to some of this too, because I learned a number of things. So then we also have, and this is just another way to append a child. You can do it like here we did it as a list. I did it as a list. So I've got HTML up here that you can see I've got a little list going, and then this create a function that says append list, and I start out with my variable document.create element and look for the list element, and it's going to create another one, and then create another variable document.create text node, which you use text node or like text content to add the content in there, and then append those together and put it in your get element by ID.
Okay.
So same thing, insert before, very similar. You just now do an insert before after you do all that. So then it goes up, to the beginning. And there is your index array.
So creating it doesn't add it to the document. You have to
correct.
append it.
That's correct. Yeah, there's like, and we'll put it all together in the next slide. But yeah, creating it, you've got to append it. And then often you have to like insert it as well. It depends. So we'll actually go look at that next, which is my slide. So this, you create it, you append it, and you insert it. And you can see like every time I click this create element button, it, just adds a new one to it. And the reason that this shows up actually is because I have it also to be on load, and then I added the function to the button as well. So I'm on a, yeah, go ahead.
So when you create an element, how do you control where that element ends up?
Yeah, great. So that's the next thing I was going to say. Let's go to the live code, and I'm going to show you just a couple things that I learned and kind of struggled with, and maybe that like is beneficial. So because you do have to pay attention to where that parent is. So if you see this line right here where it says parent div, for a little while I couldn't get this to show up. It was only showing up like beneath all of this, and I'll show you why. So, and hang on a second. this is my HTML, and I've got this pulled up here. So this is the live, my local version of this page, and then this is the code for it. So let's see if we can, there we go. Make this a little bit more like that. Okay. So let's go over here. Actually, that's probably going to confuse. So this is this is where I added this element for this create element. So in the original code, and I just copied some code from like Mozilla Developer Network at first just to play with it and see how it worked, right? So originally it didn't have this, it had this. So it had document.body.insert before, and hang on. So let's see if we can see this. And you're going to see now I've got that, it doesn't work. So, and I kept going to like inspect this element, and you can see I've got like failure to load. I've got some JavaScript errors here in the console, and it's because there is nothing you can't execute this insert before. And that's because this is the document dot body. And this, where this is inside of a div, so it's too far away from the body for that to work. So if I want it to work with that code, I have to take this and put it outside all my divs, and now it will work. And there it is. And now when I click create element, it does it, but it does it down here. So does that make sense?
Yeah, or you would have had to change dot body to dot body dot.
Well,
whatever that
yeah.
div is, right?
Yeah. So that's why it took me a little bit to figure it out. So that's why I did this and made this parent div, which was the document.get element by ID, and then that parent, that name. And so then instead of having document.getBody, I used that variable because it created like, part of this as an object, and just did the insert before for that. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. And that seems to be easier than trying to navigate the tree.
Right. Exactly. And so now you can see my JavaScript errors are gone, and, and it works. So, that was, anyway, something that I learned that was, anyway, just
so
super.
Now each one of those what's up is a separate div.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
it's a new div, or is it's just
a new div? Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So every time I create it, like if we look here, so you can see, well, I actually made them H3s because
there you go.
That I just want them to show up. So yeah, you can see it adds a new one every time. So
but that's not a new div. That's just an element.
It is,
right?
but I can make it a div,
right.
which is what it originally was, and it'll be a div. So, so yeah, I mean, that was the original code. So if I do that, it'll show up as a div.
Oh, yeah.
So there it is right there. So that was the other thing that for me just to realize was like, so this says div 1, and at first I thought it was like going to replace the text in div 1, but it doesn't. It just keeps putting it above because it's insert before. And so anyway, but knowing where you are on the tree, I find, is like kind of important.
Yeah.
Is there a way, and this is kind of getting like even further into it, like if you, because I haven't even looked at this yet, if you add an element or a div, whatever, is there a way that when you add it, you can also set like the ID in the same like step?
I would think that, I don't know that you can create the element and the ID at the same time. I don't know the answer to that.
Like pass in multiple parameters?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, like, can you manipulate that later?
I believe so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's so much you can do with this because there's so many pieces of it. And I think there's like JavaScript functions for like everything. Like you can do get element by class. You can do a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
So, you know, just trying to, I think, learn the pattern is, you know.
I guess even if you wanted to, yeah, you could do it like get element by class, and then if you want, that would return an array if there were more than one element that had that class, and then you could do a for each loop and perform an action on each item within the DOM. There are multiple.
Yep, you could. And that's when you asked about array, that's also here in this list, you know. That's how we did the insert before, because it did it before the list, the first thing in the list, because the list was also an object.
Cool.
So, yeah. Any questions? Okay.
No.
Cool.
And then Pierre was our other presenter tonight, right? Okay. Maybe he'll post it throughout the week or something.
Yep.
Kristina, do you have your code posted in Slack as well?
No, but I can.
Or is there like even just a link to your site that we can look at to inspect it?
There will be shortly. Right now, this is local. I haven't pushed it yet, but I will. I'll push it tonight. So, yep. So,
Which might be more helpful to look at than the Mozilla dev pages for right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they're good. It's just you gotta, like you were saying, you gotta weed through all the stuff to find out what you're actually, like, how you're actually going to use it.
Yeah. In fact, if I just share my screen one more time, because I did use these a lot, but like if I go here to document and create elements, so like they'll tell you these things like this, like the syntax. Here's the syntax, right? And they'll say tag name and these options. But like we're not using those options. That options is something else that looks way complicated. So anyway, I was like,
and this explains the options? No, wait.
Yeah, this over here
Options,
explains it.
Element. Oh.
So it's like, it's a constructor and you use this and it's like, you know, so there's more to it. Like you realize at everything, there's just levels. But like for what we're doing, I was like, okay, it's just the tag name, because like in their example, that was all we needed to worry about right now. So
yeah. But it looks like you can. It looks like you can do what you're saying, Chris. Add in, because I mean, if each element type has its own constructor, then you would just have to know like what order to put the parameters in as, or what the value pair would be that you would do.
Right.
So.
Whew. So actually I don't totally get that. So yet
expanding list.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see that in action. So cool. Okay.
How's everybody doing on passing stuff off?
I submitted my first 2 fluency tests last week, so.
Nice. Good job.
Yeah, catching up.
Good.
Yeah, I was looking at it. I was like, wait, it's what is this week? It's week 6. It's week 6. We got like 4 weeks left.
I know.
Like, oh no. And I've only submitted like 4 or 5, I think.
Oh, that's good. I've submitted 2.
I have to go back and rewatch everyone's presentations.
Yeah. Well, I think the first 2 too, like last week, the JavaScript objects, I spent so much time on, because I was just like, I want to get my head around this. Like, I want to learn it. And I think I'm actually spending too much time on some of these.
Well, the JavaScript object probably won't bite you in the future, because everything.
I know, exactly.
Is a JavaScript object.
Yeah, totally.
No,
yeah. And that's why I was like, I want to spend time on that. But like, I think JSON, I think this one, DOM, I think I can do today, probably in JSON, like,
Right.
Yeah.
The hardest part for me, was like finding an API for the for the Ajax one. It took.
What did you use?
I haven't decided yet.
Oh.
I've spent like an hour. I'm like, I'm just gonna pick something.
I know.
So, alrighty.
You do local storage, right?
Yeah, I got that one down now. That's the good part of presenting.
Yeah,
Like,
it
I have
is.
something to turn in.
Yep.
So, alrighty. Well, if you guys have any questions on anything else, just post in chat. Sorry, I haven't been very active on the chat, but
I don't think a whole lot of us have been.
Yeah. Yep.
and I'll be moving here in a little bit, so
Everybody's moving. What's the deal?
I know. I'm going to Charleston, West Virginia for a job.
You know, I got so
Nice.
excited for like a half second because I'm in Charleston, South Carolina,
Are you?
and I was like, Charleston, I'm in West Virginia. Nope.
I didn't even know there was a Charleston, West Virginia.
It's the capital.
What? No. No, it is not. What's your job?
I'll be an IT analyst, so like software engineering stuff,
Cool.
like
Very cool.
Nice.
eliciting requirements from customers and writing up technical specifications for programmers.
Nice. Cool.
Nice.
So,
Very nice. Where are you moving
Yeah.
from?
Utah.
Okay. Cool. Well, good. Congrats.
Yeah, I'll be down there all by myself for a little bit.
Oh. Your family will join you later?
Yeah, we're hoping to buy a house, so rent a room, and then once we get the house bought, we can move the family down into the house. So,
Cool.
Nice.
and so next week end is when I go down, and then so there won't be too much disruption at that point, but like Thanksgiving weekend and stuff like that, I'll be moving stuff, so I might be a little more preoccupied, but
Okay. Sounds good.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I noticed in the announcement that he said we're supposed to be inviting him every week to our meetings.
Oh.
Yeah.
I invited him last week,
Okay.
and I never heard anything back. So
Okay. I know.
He's been super slow to respond, so.
Yeah. And I know Chris invited him for one too.
Yeah.
But I guess each week he wants to be invited is what the announcement said.
technically I think isn't he in the no, he's not.
In our Slack.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't he? We invited him to our Slack, but I don't think he joined.
Yeah. I know someone invited him, and then the announcement